Welcome back to Waters Ironworks. We are doing another step of the power hammer repair. Today we are going to be pouring the Babbitt. It is very exciting, so we've got a whole bunch of the crew here. It is also Witch Fest out here at Pioneer Farm, so we've got a lot of guests around as well. What we've got set up is a mandrel that is the same size as the shaft that our wheels are going to be on. And if you want to come around here, Gregory, you can see what I've done is grabbed a couple pieces of leather. And I tried to find some shims that are basically going to hold this up. And then when I put these on, I want to see that it's more or less centered top and bottom. And this looks pretty good for where we're at. So with those shims cut, the next step is we're actually going to turn this over to Justin, who brought out his oxyacetylene setup, which is very helpful when you're doing this. And we're going to soot our mandrel first.
There's the soot. See how dark that gets? Instantly blackens everything.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. I'm going to take a look at what I'm trying to do here is just make sure that this is nice and centered, running pretty straight. It looks like it is. So then we've got to grab some clay. This is a special high temperature clay. It's casting putty. And we're gonna dam up everything all around this. I'm gonna roll this clay out to about pencil thickness. We're gonna put it around all of the areas and create a dam so that when we pour in the liquid metal, that it doesn't come running out the sides, fingers crossed. You do want to be a little careful not to like push this too far in, or you'll wind up blocking up area that the metal should be. So nice connection, really make sure it's on there tight, but don't shove it in to where the bearing is supposed to go. So I'm checking to make sure that I've got a good seal, both to the power hammer and also to my mandrel here that I'm pouring around. Justin's got his oxyacetylene torch. We've got the clay damming up where our bearings are going to go. As we heat this up, what Justin's going to look at doing is trying to heat really the power hammer itself and the steel and avoid burning the clay too much, right? You don't really want to catch that on fire. But it's all about preheating this so that when we pour the Babbitt in, it doesn't solidify too quickly. Have at it. So I'm going to check where we're at with the Babbitt here by dipping a piece of pine in it. And what it should start doing, it should start charring. So we're right at the temperature that we want here. This does not need to get overly hot. So we're getting ready to do the second pour. One of the things that you're going to do as you get ready for that pour, right, we check the temperature with this, but we're also going to come in with a spoon. And we're just going to scrape this stuff. Scrape that dross off of it. And I'll do that again right before we do the pour. You want to keep all those oxides and stuff out of there as much as you can. It's warm. getting some bubbling again. Yeah, so this is looking pretty good. You can see the leather, woo, it's hot, don't touch it. You can see the leather shims in there. Those will just stay, that's not a problem. You can see where I did push in a little bit further than I think I ideally would have liked to here on this side and back here a little bit, but I think it looks okay. Justin was mentioning that there's a little bit of texturing where we saw some bubbling. Also not a problem. We're gonna scrape some channels in this so that we can put oil in the top and have oil go in and lubricate the whole thing around. So next step that we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab a chisel and I'm just gonna knock this extra stuff on the top off. Ooh.
See, that's what I was gonna ask too, not just the lubrication, but the, that's lead, right? So that's really soft.
Yeah, it is. So it's primarily lead, and a lot of modern Babbitts, which is what I would really recommend using, except I'm trying to stay historically accurate, do not have lead in them. But you've got a soft metal, and my understanding is that you then have harder metals in there that form crystals, and the machine will wear down the lead, and then it'll ride sort of on those crystals. And you get a really nice, smooth, long-running bearing that's pretty low maintenance. It also has some advantages over like wheeled bearings or ball bearings and stuff. There is no way that this can catastrophically fail like a ball bearing might. So I've scraped off the top with a chisel, and now I'm coming in. I'm just trying to file all of this flat. We want it nice and flush with the top of the power hammer. The next step we're gonna do is, and that is still warm, we're gonna put some some shims, copper shims, and maybe some paper shims in here as well to build up a little bit of thickness. Then we're gonna clamp that down, and this with our mandrel in there, and we'll be able to pour a new Babbitt or the top bearing in here. The idea is that you want the top and bottom bearings separated, so when we're done, this should be able to come off separately. We'll need to take, and a big part of the reason for that is we'll need to take this off, and you see these two holes right here, and actually this is good for everybody to know. These are our oiling holes. So we're gonna pour this, then we're gonna take this off, we're gonna drill out the holes from the top, and anytime we're using this, we're going to put oil up here in the top reservoir. And I think we can probably put like a little bit of cotton or something in there so it drains a little more slowly. But that's how we're gonna oil this anytime we use it. And then we oil everything else except for the belts every time we run it. So what I'm doing is I'm coming in and I am filing off some of the corners here, just relieving those a little bit so that the shaft will sit a little bit nicer in our bearing here. One feature to point out, right, is how does the Babbitt get locked into the top of these, I don't know what you call them, but the tops of the bearings. And you'll notice this one's got 3 holes on each side. This one has those holes, but they're filled in. That's old Babbitt that we need to melt out before the next step. When we pour the Babbitt in, it'll go up into those holes, solidify, and that'll lock the top of the bearing in place in these. So we've got the bottom bearings poured. The next step is that we've got to make some shims. What we've done is cut some pieces of copper, and we're using copper because it is softer than the steel that will be spinning around. And so if this brushes up against anything while the piece is moving, it's going to be the copper that's worn away, not the shaft itself. So those are going to go in right like that. And what we want to have them do is go up to the edge of that babbitting material the whole way along. There are some holes that we're going to need to, actually I think we're just going to cut out a little loop in the back probably rather than drill holes in this. And probably put 2 shims on each side. And then as the Babbitt material wears down, we can unscrew this, take a shim out, and tighten it back up in order to keep everything running nice and smooth. Historically, when you go and you look at old Babbitting, they made shims out of all kinds of crazy stuff. Copper was pretty common, but you'd see them made out of like old punch cards and stuff like that that workers were using to log in and out, you know, kind of that thicker paper. So you've got a wide range of what you can use. We're going to do some copper. I've got some manila folders out here. We'll see what it looks like. We may toss some of those in also. So let me cut these out.
Choke hollow. That 20-ton press, getting it to run smoothly.
So we're getting close to pouring the top bearings. I think I do need a little bit more Babbitt, so I've got some more of my Babbitt bar here. I've got some of this heating up in my forge. You can see that getting nice and liquidy. We'll finish letting that melt and then we'll drop this in there, heat this up as well. I don't want to be in a situation where I start the pour and then run out of Babbitt. So a little bit of extra is perfect. I'll be back. So we're coming in, just putting a soot layer on the top of our mandrel once again. And this is just to make sure that the Babbitt doesn't stick to the mandrel and that it comes off clean. That looks perfect. We've got our shims in. Those are right up against the edge of our mandrel. They're covering the edge of the Babbitt. And what we're doing now is we're putting the bolts down and we're tightening the top of our bearings on here, or bearing housing. And let's make sure too that we're lining these up correctly as we get them in there tight. And then we're going to be able to pour our Babbitt down through the middle here, and it should flow all around. Yeah, so once we get this clamped down, then we're going to come in and we're going to re-dam it all with the clay. So coming in and just damming that up with the clay all the way around here. So we're heating this up. We want the Babbitt material when we pour it in not to solidify too quickly. So we want to get everything up to 300-ish degrees or so.
That was dribbling out has solidified now, so I think it's self-sealing.
So in the first pour, you might have noticed we had a couple leaks. We are going to put a little bit of extra damming material stretching out along those seams, try and prevent any leaking on the second one. Hopefully that works.
On the inside.
That's filled. So we're going to pop these off and take a look at what this bearing looks like. That looks beautiful.
That's a Babbitt top bearing.
That is a Babbitt top bearing. That came out real nicely. So we'll need to clean up the excess. We can see where it's spilled a little bit. It's snuck along the edges there. Let's take a look at this one.
Drill out the tops.
Yep. Also, looks really good.
Nice.
A little there.
Right there.
Yeah, a little bubble, but I don't think that's going to cause any problems. Those look beautiful.
All right.
Yeah. So we've got these poured. Now it's back to file work, get them filed nice and smooth. And then we are going to need to come in, and we'll show you guys all this on the video too, but drill out the holes here, drop those through. We've got the top pour. It looks really good. What I'm doing now is coming in and just cleaning this up, take off the majority of the excess. Make it nice and flat for the power hammer. And I think I'm going to come in here and do that same, knocking the edges off here, just relieving those corners a little bit. We're drilling out the oil holes now. Need to clean all this up. I'm just going to do a little bit of exploratory drilling. We're not really worried about keeping any of the Babbitt material up in that oil reservoir. So we're just going to drill down, drill some of that material out. We may eventually wind up drilling all of it out, but right now we just want to hit those holes. So we've got one hole through. That'll be right where the oil comes in, and we got to do the same thing on the other side, and then 2 more times on the other one. Nothing complicated about this.
There we go.
Got it all the way in. We're going to be wrapping up for today. We got the oil holes drilled. We put a little bit of oil in it. It spins. It's looking beautiful. We do still need to go in on the inside of the Babbitt and cut some oil lines to help distribute that oil, although it is clearly flowing pretty well even without it. So huge progress on restoring the power hammer. Next up is we're going to be putting this wheel back on it and figuring out how to mount our motor up in the rafters. Then it's ordering the belts and finish putting this thing together and getting the dies in. But we are looking in really good shape. Hopefully this was informative. If you've got one of these hammers and you're trying to restore it, watching what I'm going through I hope is useful. I've had to put a lot of this stuff together myself from different videos, and I hope I make it easier for someone else in the future. Thanks so much for joining me, and we will see you again soon.